Spain once held the world in its hands. In the 16th century, the largest empire on earth wasn't British, it was Spanish. For the first time in history, one crown commanded a global empire, so vast people said. The sun never sets on the Spanish Empire. But here is the paradox. The richest empire the world had ever seen collapsed under the weight of its own treasure. And the reason this matters today is simple. Because just like Spain, we often mistake sudden inflows of money for real wealth, and the crash that follows is always brutal. When Spain stumbled into the New World after 1492, it struck an infinite jackpot. Gold and silver in unimaginable quantities poured into Spanish hands. After conquering Mexico and Peru, Spain unlocked the legendary mountain of silver at Potosi, a mine so large it was called the mountain that eats men. For over a century, it fed a conveyor belt of treasure ships crossing the Atlantic. Between 1500 and 1650, Spain imported an estimated 180,000 tons of silver and 2,000 tons of gold. That's more silver than all of Europe had mined in the previous 1,000 years combined. This treasure didn't just reshape Europe, it reshaped the world. From Spain, silver flowed east to the Mediterranean, north to the Low Countries, and west across the Pacific to Manila, creating the first truly global economy. And here's a shocker. When Jamestown, the first permanent English colony, was founded in 1607, little more than a swamp, Mexico City already had universities, printing presses, and cathedrals. Spain wasn't just ahead. It was building global infrastructure while Britain was still fumbling with failed colonies. And yet, this empire was hollow at its core. Spain confused treasure with wealth. The silver was real, but what they did with it turned strength into weakness. Prices in Spain exploded, quadrupling in a century. Orderly Spaniards found bread and clothing harder to afford, even as their nation sat on mountains of silver. Why? Economists call it the price revolution, the first great wave of global inflation, triggered by too much silver chasing too few goods. The more silver Spain brought in, the poorer its people felt. The mistakes ran deeper. Instead of investing in its own industries, Spain spent its fortune on imports. Italian merchants and Dutch traders grew rich, selling luxuries to Spain, paid for with American silver. The empire's own industries withered. Why build factories when you could just wait for the treasure fleet? And of course, the Spanish monarchs burned staggering amounts of money on war. Treasure from Mexico and Peru funded endless conflicts against the Ottoman Turks, the Dutch, and the English. The infamous Spanish Armada of 1588 was fueled by New World silver, and when it failed, the financial shock was devastating. So where did all the gold and silver go? Into battlefields, ships, and debt. Spain wasn't just spending what arrived. They were borrowing against treasure that hadn't yet landed. German and Genoese bankers advanced enormous loans to the crown, secured by future silver ships. It was suicidal. If a fleet was wrecked or intercepted, Spain defaulted. And it defaulted repeatedly 4 times in the 16th century alone. Imagine being the richest empire in the world and still declaring bankruptcy every 2 decades. Into this fragile system sailed the pirates. They were not just random marauders. They were weapons of economic warfare. England and the Netherlands understood that if you struck the treasure fleets, you collapsed Spain's credit. Francis Drake, backed by Queen Elizabeth, plundered Spanish galleons, returning with treasure worth half of England's annual revenue. In 1628, the Dutch privateer Payetten captured an entire Spanish treasure fleet. That single strike nearly toppled Spain's finances. Each lost fleet was a sovereign default in real time. Spain's lifeline had become its Achilles heel, and its rivals reinvested the stolen silver into their own navies, banks, and trading companies, the foundations of their future empires. By the mid-1600s, Spain's decline was visible. Inflation, repeated bankruptcies, and constant war had drained its coffers. The empire that had terrified Europe was a fading giant. The lesson is brutal but clear. Treasure is not wealth. Real wealth comes from systems that produce value over time, from investments in productivity, from institutions that endure. Spain bankrupted itself because it thought owning half the world and endless silver meant power forever. In reality, it meant fragility. History doesn't repeat, but its rhythms are hard to ignore. The richest empire in the world collapsed because it confused treasure for wealth. And any society that makes the same mistake flooding its economy with money while hollowing out its foundations is walking the same path. The question isn't whether history will repeat. It's whether we'll recognize the warning in time. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.